one of the biggest cases since Dobbs. The expense for unborn babies and their mothers is astronomical. It is costly. It is deadly.
4 years ago, the United States Supreme Court made one of the most important legal decisions in our country's history.
In the Dobbs decision, the justices said that the power to legislate the life issue would return to the people and their elected representatives.
But here's what people got wrong that day.
We need our federal government to not only respect state laws like Texas's, care about the sanctity of human life, but also care about the health and well-being of women and young girls in our country.
The battle has shifted. The tactics have changed, and the enemy has adapted.
This is a complete violation of all of the above. It's a spiritual battle. It's good versus evil. It's light versus dark. It's truth versus lies. Life is valuable and worthy of protection from the moment of conception.
And now, please welcome Amy O'Donnell.
All right, well, it's June 24th at the time we're sitting down and having this podcast, and today is a significant day in history because it's the day that the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Man, and we have been praying, we have been waiting for this for over 40 years, and the day finally came 4 years ago today, and so we're excited. We're going to get into all of that, and but, you know, here's something that most people don't know. You would think that when that happened, that the fight would be over. It would be done. But actually, that's not the case. The fight is far from over. And we're going to talk about that with our guest today. I'm so excited to have the executive director for Texas Alliance for Life, Amy O'Donnell. She's on the front lines. She's a warrior in this fight, the pro-life movement, and I'm so excited to sit down and talk with her today. So, Amy, welcome to the Defending Freedom Show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, take us back. What does it mean to you, sitting here today, having this conversation on the anniversary of the overturning of Roe versus Wade?
I cannot believe it's been 4 years. Our team was in Washington, D.C. for the Dobbs case. We were outside the Supreme Court when the case was being heard in the Supreme Court, and there were two sides. There was the pro-life side and there was the pro-abortion side, and they each had speakers and huge setups for audiences to listen in on just the debate that was going on outside of the Supreme Court, just like was happening inside the Supreme Court. And you just saw the division, you saw the sides there. And that was a huge moment for our team to be a part of that moment in DC. But then to see down the road that, sure enough, we had passed a law in 2021 called the Human Life Protection Act. Mm-hmm. Some would refer to it as a trigger bill. And that law would take place or go into effect 30 days after the final judgment in whatever case overturned Roe. We could have had no way of predicting that would happen the very next year. So we passed that law. We worked several sessions to pass that law. That law passed. We were there for the Dobbs case, and then sure enough, Roe was overturned. And before it was overturned, we had the leak. And I think most people can think about exactly where they were if this is a big issue for them when the leak came down. And I know exactly where I was. I know who I was sitting with. I know the surprise and the expectancy that leak news filled us with. And we would say that we were cautiously optimistic that the decision when it came down would be the same as was reflected in the leak. And so sure enough, on June 24th, 2022, that happened. And we found out that Roe was in fact overturned. And a lot of people asked, what now? Is this the end of abortion now that life is protected in Texas? Can we give our money other places? Do we still need pregnancy centers? And there were a lot of questions there that now, 4 years down the road, we have answers to, at least where we are in the journey of protecting life today.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it was such a tremendous moment in history. I mean, honestly, and you said something, you were there. What was the energy like? Like, obviously there was people there for, mm-hmm. and then there was people there against. I mean, when that decision was made, did anything happen? I mean, what took place? So outside of the Supreme Court, it was a charged atmosphere. There were speakers amplifying the messaging from both sides, with so-called influencers on both sides coming to the mic to talk about why Roe should be overturned or why Roe should stay the law of the land, so to speak. And so as all of that was unfolding, we were listening into the arguments
I had AirPods in. I was sharing an AirPod set with a coworker, and I just remember trying to find a quiet place. I sat down on the curb with all of the chaos around me and was just trying to listen in to see if I could predict in any way based on the arguments what would happen. And what's fascinating about that is that there were all kinds of pro-lifers there from all different backgrounds advocating for life, and then of course the other side was very charged and very angrily trying to say that their way should stay the law of the land. And it was almost indescribable what it was like to be in DC at that time. But one of the biggest takeaways for us was that we were there with a lot of other warriors for life, and we got to be a part of that moment with people like Michael New and other pro-life leaders from across the country. And that is forever for us just a place that we were honored to be on the ground when all of that was unfolding.
That's awesome. And you mentioned the Human Life Protection Act in Texas and kind of had that locked and loaded, right, based on that decision. Can you describe your guys' work, like unpack what that law is, and then kind of describe your guys' work leading up to getting that in place?
Yeah, so we believe that the best approach to protecting life is an incremental approach. And across 39 years, we have worked to protect life incrementally in whatever ways that we could while Roe was the law of the land, through parental notification laws, ultrasound laws, Women's Right to Know Act, and more. We protected life along the way, but there was always the goal of fully protecting life from conception. And so the Human Life Protection Act was a bill written with that goal in mind, that it wouldn't take effect immediately. It would only take effect after Roe was overturned. And so it took us several sessions and to lobby, to advocate for it, to get people on board and to get it passed. And then sure enough, the same year that the Heartbeat Act passed, the Human Life Protection Act passed, and it got overshadowed by the Heartbeat Act because that went into effect September of 2021. And of course it was litigated in the courts, but it still protected life. But then the very next year when Roe was overturned, the Human Life Protection Act went into effect, and there was still a large number of abortions that happened between conception and the heartbeat being determined in an unborn child. And so the Human Life Protection Act completely closed that door, protecting life from conception from legal abortions in Texas. And so that still makes it illegal for anybody to perform an abortion or provide abortion pills anywhere in the state of Texas, with steep penalties for anybody who violates those laws.
So you mentioned the abortion pills, right? And I think that, kind of shifting is, you would think that laws like that, you would think that the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and it did have a significant impact. Totally did, right? I even think it had a significant impact, not just from a legal standpoint, but from a spiritual standpoint.
Absolutely.
For our country. I think it was, it's just an incredible moment. But, it doesn't mean that the battle is over, right? The abortion pills, what's happening on that front, even women being, is it the right term to say that they're trafficked out of state to have abortion? Can you talk to that, like kind of the new battlefront since Roe versus Wade has been overturned?
It's interesting to note that in the Dobbs decision, the justices said that the power to legislate the life issue would return to the people and their elected representatives. We've heard a lot of people say that just means the states, and that the power to legislate abortion returned to the states. Well, in Texas, our state has decided that life should be protected from conception, but we're seeing that violated from other states, and that is because it is both a federal and a state issue. The power returned to the people and their elected representatives, that's both state and federal elected representatives. And if it were just up to the states, well, in Texas, we wouldn't have a problem with illegal abortion drugs flooding into our state right now. But the federal government has allowed it. And so right now what we're doing is putting pressure on the federal government to enforce the Comstock Act. It is a law that has been in place since the 1800s that makes it illegal to mail any abortifacient by any mail, common carrier, delivery service into any state, pro-life or otherwise. And it is a law that was referenced in the Louisiana v. FDA case when it made it up to the Supreme Court, when they were trying to decide in the back and forth with the Fifth Circuit whether to stop allowing the FDA to mail illegal abortion drugs into states like Texas while the case moved forward, or to allow them to continue as the case moved forward. But 2 justices referenced the Comstock Act. And that's notable because they recognize that that is something that's not being enforced that could completely stop this federal circumvention of our laws. But the other thing is that the Biden administration in 2023, a year after Roe was overturned, decided that women had a right to so-called reproductive health care. And the way that he was going to bypass pro-life state laws like Texas's was to continue to allow the FDA to send mail-order abortion drugs without an in-person physician visit that was always required before COVID. But when COVID hit, people weren't able to go to the doctor, and so they determined that women would therefore not be able to get abortion pills. And so they relaxed the regulations to allow mail-order abortion during COVID, and the Biden-era administration said that we want this to be the rule moving forward, that the FDA will continue to allow mail-order abortion drugs into any state regardless of their laws, so that women can have the reproductive health care that we feel like they have a right to. So it was a complete snub to Texas laws and a complete overreach of the federal government. And so the Louisiana v. FDA case is asking for that to cease, asking for the FDA to go back to what's called the REMS for mifepristone. And so if that does stop the allowance of mail-order abortion drugs without an in-person physician visit, and that requirement goes back into effect, well, in Texas, women can't go to a physician for pills, and telehealth out of state would be illegal. And so that would be one other way to curb the illegal flood of chemical abortion drugs. But so what we're working with right now is really the federal government allowing the circumvention of our laws. And then we have international pills coming from across the border in Mexico or other countries. So it is something that in multiple areas will take federal action to stop those drugs from flooding into Texas.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask you. So because of that, they can. I was going to ask you because it sounds like they can go get on a teledoc visit and get access to those. Is that right?
You don't even have to have a teledoc visit. You can just go on a website, put in information, order abortion pills, and they'll send it. And what's very troubling about that is that people have gone to show that they really don't even check that it would be safe for you. There was somebody, I believe, with Charlotte Lozier Institute or another similar organization who put in that they were a 13-year-old, they'd had a C-section, they'd had multiple previous miscarriages or just different things in their medical history that would say that this would be unsafe for that person. Even the age should have been a flag, and they still sent the drugs to them. And so it has far surpassed the safe, legal, and rare mindset that the other side used to have. And now the pro-abortion side is in favor of abortion on demand at whatever cost, regardless of the effect to women's health and well-being. And that's very, very unfortunate.
And this was a girl, a 13-year-old?
This was somebody acting just to see if I say okay,
they were okay.
Yeah, so if I say I'm 13, I've had several previous C-sections, maybe I've had cancer, maybe I've had this or this. I'd have to look up the exact details, but they still sent the pills to that person because they don't really care. And the other harmful aspect to that is that if a woman has an ectopic pregnancy and she doesn't know and she orders the pills, it could cost her very life. She could hemorrhage, she could die. And so, there are a lot of complication risks with these drugs. And the other thing that the FDA did that complicates everything is they removed the reporting requirements for complications for anything short of death. And so they don't require reporting for women who end up in emergency rooms, who end up with septic shock, who end up with hemorrhaging, who lose their fertility. Wow. And then they say, because there are no big numbers of reporting complications, that then they're therefore safe and this should be allowed. But they cut off the requirement to report. So all in all, we need our federal government to not only respect state laws like Texas's, care about the sanctity of human life, but also care about the health and well-being of women and young girls in our country. And this is a complete violation of all of the above. Right.
I mean, to me, that's wild that they would fulfill an order for an underage, like a minor child.
Exactly.
Let's just call this, even though it was under the radar, but still,
Right.
it was a minor child. Like
undercover operator acting
when
like a
I take my
13-year-old.
kid to the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
they're on my insurance. I
Yeah.
have to say I'm their parent or guardian. I have to sign for them just to get their like teeth cleaned.
Yes.
But yet,
You'll send them abortion pills.
wow.
Yeah. And what if that 13-year-old really was a 13-year-old with an ectopic pregnancy? What if there were other reasons that there could be complications like an Rh negative blood type? Like I have a daughter with an Rh negative blood type, and I tell her, tell your friends, because I know that you're going to have friends on both sides of this, that if they get abortion pills and they're Rh negative, if they don't get a RhoGAM shot, it could cost them their future fertility. Those are things that aren't shared. And so there's a lack of information, there's a lack of oversight, and there's a lack of care and concern for life, absolutely, but for women and young girls in our country as well.
It just, I see patterns.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like what was going on during COVID.
Yeah.
You know, no oversight, no, you know, if you reported anything, you know, you were kind of cuckoo wacko. It just like, that's insane to me.
It is very concerning what is being allowed at the expense of our babies' lives and the lives, health, and future fertility of their mothers.
Wow. All under the disguise of, what did Biden?
Reproductive health care.
Reproductive health care. They always put some kind of fancy
Spin.
name on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what they do. So, the Fifth Circuit recently upheld states' rights against the FDA's loose regulations, right, for
Yes.
mail-order drugs.
Yep.
And you guys put out a press release celebrating that. So
Mm-hmm.
why is that ruling significant, and what does that mean for Texas going forward?
Well, it's still moving forward. So that case bounced back and forth between the Fifth Circuit and the Supreme Court. Now it's back at the Fifth Circuit. We actually just signed on to an amicus brief with SBA Pro-Life America and other pro-life groups from across the state and the country. That was significant that the Fifth Circuit said that they believe that the mail-order abortion drugs should stop while the case moved forward. And that says that they believe that there was standing. And it's always a question of if a case goes to a federal court, does that case or the plaintiffs in that case, do they have standing? That means that is the right question asked the right way by the right people who can show irreparable harm or damages in some way by this case as presented. And so if the person doesn't have standing, they'll dismiss the case. And that's not weighing a case on its merits. It's just saying that these people lack standing, therefore we're not going to rule on the merits. But what we saw in the Fifth Circuit was that they believed that there was standing. We saw this young girl was hurt by an abusive partner in Louisiana forcing an abortion on her. The state of Louisiana is saying that they are also facing damages because they're having to pay the medical expenses for women who have complications or ending up in the emergency room because of these drugs flooding into their state illegally. And the Fifth Circuit said, we believe you have standing. We believe they need to stop while this moves forward. And then that was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court didn't rule on the merits. It's important to note that, but they overturned the stay from the Fifth Circuit, allowing the status quo to continue as it had been, but the case to proceed. And so now this is one of the biggest cases since Dobbs that could have an impact on protecting life in our state and in our nation.
What would the impact be?
The impact, if Louisiana wins and the FDA is forced to go back to the pre-COVID guidelines for mifepristone, the impact would be that mail-order abortion drugs would no longer be allowed without that in-person physician visit, which in Texas would be illegal. No physicians can prescribe drugs to women in Texas, and so it would cut off the flow of mail-order abortion drugs, mifepristone, into Texas. Well, in the midst of that Louisiana case unfolding and the news coming out that the justices on the Fifth Circuit decided when the justices on the Fifth Circuit decided the FDA should no longer be allowed to send mail-order abortion drugs into states like Louisiana or Texas, the pro-abortion side shifted immediately. And they said, well, guess what? You don't even need the first pill in an abortion. We'll just send you the second pill. Well, that's even more horrific. So the way the abortion pill regimen works, it's a 2-pill regimen. Mifepristone is what's being addressed in the FDA case. Mifepristone is the first pill in the regimen that cuts off progesterone to the unborn baby. When you cut off the progesterone, that baby dies. The second pill, misoprostol, expels the baby from the mother's body. So what they're essentially saying is you don't have to take the life of the unborn child first. We'll just give you the pill to expel this child from your body, which means that women will not only be seeing their babies passed through these abortion drugs that they've taken, they will give birth to babies born early, babies born alive, and the myriad of complex emotions that our women would have to deal with if that's the case would be astronomical. But also, it's not always effective, and it carries a risk of birth defects, serious birth defects. So then let's say the baby survives and is born. It could face complications for life because the mother took those drugs.
Right.
And then the complication rates go up exponentially with the misoprostol-only abortion. But that shows you how extreme the pro-abortion side is and how little they care about the health and well-being of women. That's not health care. It's not health care to say that you should be able to do this to kill your unborn baby and we don't care if it takes your life too. That's horrible. That's not health care. That is something else entirely. That is big pharma wanting money. That's Danco and Gen BioPro wanting money for the sale of those pills. It's people wanting to be right and offering those pills. But the expense for unborn babies and their mothers is astronomical. It is costly. It is deadly.
My mind just thinking about that is just the trauma, the death, the carnage that would come out of just that second pill, just even what's going on now. But I can't even fathom what the cost of that would be, what the impact of these mothers' lives would be, these children. Why do you think that people that fight so hard for women's reproductive health care, do you think it's just ignorance? Like they don't know all of this, or do they just not care? Or is it that because we're in a spiritual battle, it's demonic in nature and they just don't, there's scales over their eyes? Like, what do you think it is that they, sitting here listening to this, I'm like, how would you not, like if I was, let's just say hypothetically, I was somebody who was pro-abortion and I heard what you just said, my mind would be changed. Like I'd be like, okay, I am not for that.
At least maybe we should question it.
Right. So do you have conversations with people that are pro-abortion and bring up these points, and then what does that look like? Or do you ever change anybody's mind? Because that would change my mind, what you just said.
We at Texas Alliance for Life often say that we've been in the business of changing hearts and saving lives since 1988. And it is something that we do want to work to change hearts on the value of the sanctity of human life, the value of an unborn life from the moment of conception. That's the first thing that we want to help people understand, is that biology says life begins at fertilization or conception. That's a very unique DNA human being from the moment of fertilization or conception. And it's a life valuable and worthy of protection. And you and I sitting here today are the same person that we were at that moment of fertilization. We're further along in human development. We're further along in our lifespan, but we're no less human, no less valuable and worthy of protection than we were at that little point in our mother's womb. And
right. And if somebody would have cut our life off at that point, we would not be sitting here having this conversation today.
And it blows my mind that people can't think long term like that. And it makes me sad to think that people, I say drink the Kool-Aid a lot. Maybe that ages me. I'm a Gen Xer. But I do believe a lot of people have drank the Kool-Aid of Planned Parenthood propaganda and indoctrination, and our nation saying that abortion is a solution to everything, to injustice, to poverty, to women wanting to achieve their dreams and goals, and that if you have an unplanned pregnancy, it could cost you your future. And so that's something that has been messaged from every direction to women in the United States under Roe for 49 years, and still post-Roe, we see that messaging all around us. There have been games where May Day has flown flags over stadiums, even in states like Texas, advertising where people can get chemical abortion drugs. And at the end of the day, I have to look at it from a Christian perspective. I'm a Christian, and our organization itself, non-sectarian, nonpartisan. But I sat and reflected on it all recently, and it just dawned on me that this battle for life is not going to end until Jesus comes back. Because at the end of the day, it's a spiritual battle. It's good versus evil. It's light versus dark. It's truth versus lies and spinning truth, or, trying to make things look like truth that really aren't truth, like abortion is healthcare, or that it's a blob of tissues or a clump of cells or whatever, their way of trying to spin it to make it not seem like a life that's valuable and worthy of protection. And so with that, I anticipate that we'll keep making incremental gains where we can, protect life where we can. It's going to continue to unfold on an election by election basis. We're always one election away from losing our gains. And so that's why it is so extremely important that we remember it's about changing hearts and saving lives. We want to be persuading people that life is valuable and worthy of protection from the moment of conception. And once we gain ground there, then it's easier for us to protect life as our climate shifts politically in an election by election basis.
Right. And, you mentioned talking about elections. We've seen a lot of abortion industries try to bypass state laws through ballot initiatives.
Yes.
Right. And so they try to amend the Constitution, putting abortion-related referendums in there to get them passed. We've seen that in many states. I think that was recently in Virginia was one of the states. I think it's been in 16 states. I mean, what do you see going on nationally, and is Texas a target for that?
That is not something that is likely to happen in the state of Texas, just by way of what it requires for a constitutional amendment to pass or to even be put on the ballot. And so Texas, as it stands right now, is a pro-life state. That's why we have life protected from conception. And so we know that there's big money coming from outside the state of Texas to try to flip our elections. We know that this is one of the key issues behind a lot of those donors bringing money into our state, among other issues. And so it's unfortunate to see in other states that those ballot initiatives have required or caused pro-life laws to go backwards and for life to not be as protected. And the way that they're written is often sneaky, it's confusing, people don't quite understand, it's misleading. And so it's unfortunate to see that has gained ground in other states. But I don't foresee that happening in Texas.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So I know that a lot of people, because we are such a pro-life state, thank you, Jesus.
Yes.
But a lot of critics have said that because of that, we actually put women in danger. And I know that you guys and squash that narrative. What do you say to that? What is your counter to that narrative that they put out there?
Every law in Texas has protected the life or health of the mother if she faces a complication arising from her pregnancy. And the language in the law as of this year is the same language in the law in 2013. And so the Human Life Protection Act taking effect didn't change what physicians were already operating under in Texas law. The difference was life was protected from the moment of conception. And so the law was always clear on what it allowed, but we heard that there were some physicians who didn't understand how to apply that in practice. And while we don't think that's the fault of the law, and we're not going to try to say where that fault lies if it's not the law, we worked to pass a bill called the Life of the Mother Act in the last legislative session that requires physicians to receive training on the law, what the law allows to protect the life or health of the mother, and not just physicians, but attorneys working in hospital settings as well. So wherever there were loopholes there, wherever people felt like they didn't have the information they need, they are now required to go through training to ensure that those gaps are filled and that women receive the standard of care that Texas law allows and they deserve.
Wow. And on that same vein, where they say it would harm women and stuff, you and I, of course, this is my first time actually meeting you in person, so it's great. I didn't get a chance to run into you, although I did meet some of your team at the GOP
awesome.
convention. We were at the GOP convention, and there was a little bit of controversy going on, right, around some of the planks regarding this, and one of them was putting laws in place that would penalize the woman if she went and had an abortion. What is your thoughts on that?
It's important to note that this equal protection group that goes under different names, Abolish Abortion, Foundation to Abolish Abortion Texas, they have groups across the country. It is not a new group or it's not a new approach to protecting life. It has just never gained any ground. They've never passed any laws. They've never saved any lives. They've never stopped any abortions. In fact, they've opposed on record the laws that we've passed to protect life in Texas and in other states. But in Texas, the Heartbeat Act, House Bill 7, with increased penalties for abortion providers who send illegal mail-order abortion drugs into our state or provide them to women, the Human Life Protection Act, they, at our Capitol on record, testified against all of those in opposition. And their reason for their opposition was it's not enough, in their view, to stop the pipeline and hold illegal abortion providers accountable if it also doesn't put women in prison for life or death penalty.
Wow.
And there was a story of a young woman in Colorado where abortion is sadly legal. And an 18-year-old young woman went to a Planned Parenthood and she had an abortion. They botched the abortion and she died. And that's tragic. You think of 18-year-olds, how their brains aren't even fully developed. I have 4 kids. Their brains don't fully develop till they're in their 20s. She was in a state where she was told that this was legal. And of course, in the United States, where for years women have been told that this is a solution to unplanned pregnancies and this is how you achieve your dreams and goals. So an 18-year-old thought that was her only option. She went to a Planned Parenthood and it cost her her life. This Abolish Abortion group, they said that that woman deserved death and that that was God's justice, and that that was her just punishment for what she did. And the hitman that she hired to take the life of her unborn child killed her as well, and that was God's justice. Well, that was heartbreaking to see and hear such judgment and legalistic, mean Christianity aimed at a tragic loss of life, 2 lives like that.
Right.
And we have always believed in stopping the abortion provider. That's why in Texas, Planned Parenthood can't provide any surgical abortions. All surgical abortion providers, chemical abortion providers in Texas have left the state. They can't do that here.
Right.
But there they can, and we hope that Colorado gets on board with Texas. Texas leads the way a lot. Colorado has a ways to go. But it's heartbreaking to hear that that woman lost her life in a state where they told her that that was the acceptable approach. And even more horrific, that somebody who advocates for the protection of life would say that that woman deserved death. But that shows you how extreme they are. And in the last legislative session, there was a bill that was set in a committee in the Texas House, and multiple pro-life groups reached out to the leaders and said that it was not in the best interest of anybody for this bill to move forward. And so it was decided to remove this bill from committee and not allow the hearing. Texas Alliance for Life vocally asked our supporters to reach out to legislators and ask them to also say that this bill should not move forward and should not get the hearing, because we knew that would open the door to a myriad of attacks against legislators should it not pass, which we knew wouldn't happen because they haven't passed any laws. But all that to say, because we were vocal about it online, they put the blame on Texas Alliance for Life. The reality is their law didn't go anywhere because leadership in Texas doesn't want it and doesn't agree with it. And the pro-life movement doesn't want it and doesn't agree with it. And it's never been the approach of the pro-life movement. And they consider themselves anti-pro-life movement. And so they've showed up at our events for the last year. And we really did graciously do our best to just keep doing what we do. Our goal is to educate people and to do the work of Texas Alliance for Life while they protested and while they showed up. And so we didn't feel like we were supposed to speak until it felt like the right time. And at the convention, I knew it was the right time, and our board collectively agreed. And so we went in there because they have a desire to use a minority of passionate grassroots people to force their views on an apathetic majority. And so that's why they targeted the convention in an effort to try to make it look like that's what the majority of Republicans want. And so they went in there, they spent tens of thousands of dollars on brochures, pamphlets, signs, handouts,
they had a
cards.
lot of stuff.
I come from a background in communications. I could tell you how much a multi-page high gloss paper brochure in color costs. And on that scale, I would say they spent upwards of $50,000, $60,000. The booth that we had, our little 10 by 10 booth, was $3,000. I believe they had 3 booths and one was premium. They spent tens of thousands, 50, 60, 70,000 easily on the convention. Well, you look at a group like that, they brought people in from across the United States, and they weren't grassroots trying to determine the future of Texas. They were people from across the nation, passionate about this movement that is all rhetoric, no backing, and trying to push their way through a group of people who want to do right and want to protect life and don't understand the nuances of equal protection and repealing statutes. And so we went into this convention with one of the goals of what we do, and that's to educate people on what they're really advocating for, who they really are, which their behavior showed itself. We didn't even have to educate on that. And then just also why that's bad news for women. And we've heard from many delegates since the convention, even after the votes at the convention, who said to our team members, we didn't realize that that is what repealing those statutes does. We didn't understand that when we did that voice vote, when you were trying to get that language out. And even some people said, we are so sorry.
Right.
And so from an educational perspective, our goal was achieved because people are still talking about it. People are looking at it. Reporters are writing about it. New York Times is coming out with an article today, June 24th. And so when you look at that, we open the door for more education to happen to keep that group from gaining more ground because they're anti-pro-life, they oppose our laws, and they could set our movement backwards. All around, they're just bad news. And so we don't want people to think that's who pro-lifers are. It's just best to continue to just shut the door on them and educate people on why that needs to continue moving forward.
Right. And the way it was written, the equal protection and the way they wrote it, it's very tricky, right? Because if you are very pro-life, you're all in, and then you read that, but you don't understand what the real agenda is behind it, it could create a bad movement. It can create, like you said, it could set the pro-life movement back,
right,
actually. And those laws, what would those mean for pregnancy centers, right? Because wouldn't that hurt pregnancy centers, which
Absolutely.
are an incredible resource, by the way, for women in crisis pregnancies. But what would that do if laws like that were passed and penalties were imposed on these women? What would that mean for pregnancy centers?
Well, so one of the statutes they listed to repeal was 1906. 1906 is something that Texas Alliance for Life is very well familiar with in the penal code because it's part of the Prenatal Protection Act that we helped pass in 2003 that recognizes the personhood of the unborn child and says that if anybody takes the life of an unborn child in their mother's womb, then they should be charged for that child's death. And if they take the mother's life as well, that's a double homicide. But there's an exemption in that statute for the mother herself because that has been the case for every pro-life law because we want to stop providers, we want to support women. They want to repeal that exemption that keeps women from being prosecuted for abortion in the penal code. And in the penal code there, for homicide of life of a child under the age of 10, the penalties in Texas are life in prison or the death penalty. So when we look at the work that pregnancy centers do, pregnancy centers are saving lives in Texas today just as much as they were before Dobbs overturned Roe because of the trafficking of illegal abortion drugs into our state because they're so readily available across the border in South Texas. This is a very real issue that we face. And so in pregnancy centers, I'm on the board of a pregnancy center, women are coming in who are abortion minded. Women are coming in who even have ordered pills and say that they've ordered pills and they're choosing life. Sometimes they're coming in with the pills in hand and they choose life after they see their baby on the ultrasound, they hear support is available, and they hand the pills over and they walk out and that baby's life is protected from that day forward.
Wow.
There are also many pregnancy centers that offer abortion pill reversal. So let's say a woman gets those pills. She takes the first one that makes a progesterone drop, mifepristone, and she regrets it. She can call and seek an abortion pill reversal, go in, get progesterone to counter that, raise her progesterone back up, save her baby. Well, that's effective 65-70% of the time, which is wonderful. But for the 30 to 35% time of the time that it's not effective, that means that woman, knowing she did something that could take her child's life, tried to do something to reverse it. That pregnancy center director knows that act happened and that she left and that child died. Well, mandatory reporting requirements in Texas require a pregnancy center director to report that mother for taking the life of her unborn child, knowingly doing that, even seeking a reversal. That's manslaughter, that's homicide.
Wow.
And so steep penalties. And so if women fear prosecution, they won't walk through the doors. If women want an abortion pill reversal, they won't make a call or walk through those doors. And when women have abortions, we believe that restorative justice should be available to them where they can go to a pregnancy center or a church, many churches offer this as well, and seek abortion recovery classes. And if they fear prosecution, they will not do that, which means that they will be forever locked in their grief and in their pain and in their shame. And it's women finding freedom and telling their stories that also helps other women choose life. So all around, it's bad news for pregnancy centers. It's bad news for women. And we still want to hold the providers accountable. So we do that right. Best case scenario, we get the federal government to enforce the Comstock Act. Then that means all mail order drugs have to stop flowing in the United States as a whole.
Wow. Yeah, no, I mean, pregnancy centers are such a valuable resource.
Huge.
Like, we don't want to do anything that's going to prevent women from going to them to seek resources and help in their time of need.
Well, what if a woman takes chemical abortion drugs and she has an ectopic pregnancy or a condition where she's hemorrhaging and losing a lot of blood, and then she's afraid to go to the emergency room for fear of prosecution? It could cost her life.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well said. So shifting gears, right? We're kind of looking down the road. You know, I think that there's going to be a lot of people listening to this podcast, this conversation, and absorbing, taking in what you've said. But for the person that maybe they've been sitting on the sidelines, or they haven't known how to get involved, or they get convicted, and they know something's deeply wrong in the culture, right? And particularly around this area. You know, what is your message to them? Like, how can they get involved? How can they get active? How can they start making a difference?
If somebody really comes to the place of recognizing that life is valuable and worthy of protection, I would recommend that they look for pregnancy centers in their area that they can be involved with, that they can make donations to. I would recommend that they get involved with groups like Texas Alliance for Life and see how they can support our efforts to protect life legislatively, and to outreach with organizations across the state who are boots on the ground, and to counter misinformation in the media, and to defend our laws in the courts when they're challenged. Or to see at their church if there's any way that they can be a support for single moms. Single moms in churches often feel like they don't fit any certain group, that they don't have the support they need. They aren't necessarily, young adults because they have children, or women's ministry fits because they have, children responsibilities of both a mom and a dad. And so their schedules are more complicated. It's harder to find a fit. And I think a good solid single moms ministry is also very, very helpful. And I met with somebody from Embrace Grace recently. They offer a whole curriculum for single moms that's amazing, and I would recommend they also take a look at that and go to their pastor and see if they can do something to help the single moms in their church. Absolutely.
And another question, what do you see young people rising up? Do you see a shift in the next generation? Are they getting involved in the pro-life movement, or what do you see in that generation?
Yes. We're seeing a shift culturally with young men, Gen Z young men especially. They're going to church more. We see those headlines from New York City of men are now going to Catholic churches to find their future wife in New York City. And so there's some stories that have come out on that. But in general, I believe that the young men especially are looking for purpose and meaning. And I spoke at a UTSA Students for Life dinner, and the president came up to me after, and I talked about the pro-life movement, the pro-life proven method of protecting lives incrementally, and the abolitionist approach that would set our movement back. And he came up and he thanked me for talking about all of that, but also for addressing the abolitionist equal protection approach, because they're going to college campuses and they're trying to recruit people, young men, young women, to their cause. And for Students for Life there, that was causing some divisions and some questions. And he said, I'm so glad that you talked about that, because some of those people, and they were all young men, are here today and they got to hear what you had to say. And I know that you will help them as they reason through this to see that this is the right place to land. And so that is one of the reasons that I knew it was time for me to speak up, because people need somebody to lead on this and to take the hits for it, because other people are unsure where to land on it. It's dividing pregnancy centers, it's dividing student groups. So we need somebody to lead on the proven pro-life method. And if that's me and I get attacked for it, so be it. I'm not going to stop. That's just the way that I'm made. Come at me more, I will just dig my heels in, because I have a holy stubbornness. But all of that aside, we want to make sure that we're steering that passion in the right direction. And that's for young men and young women. I've seen more articles on young men. I'm excited about that, because I believe that that's huge for the future of the United States. I hope that the statistics are the same for young women. But in general, I do believe that younger generation understands that there is not true community on social media or online. There's something missing about some of the things that have just been bombarding them in their lives, and they're looking for true meaning and they're looking for purpose. And they can find that obviously first in the church. Right. And then secondly, in working in some of these areas of making what's wrong with the world right. And abortion is one of those areas where we need to make what's wrong with the world right and get it back in line with God's will.
Amen. Well, that is encouraging to hear. I love that. And, I would probably attribute that we're seeing that kind of revival in young men to the late great Charlie Kirk. Man, he did such incredible work on campuses, and he was such what a person to model your life after. He's incredible.
But look at how he did it.
I know.
Versus how, for example, you were at the convention, you saw how this group of men behaved.
Oh yeah, total different.
Day. You don't win the art of persuasion with a hammer.
Right.
You win it by sitting down and looking at people eye to eye and having a conversation. And that is why Charlie Kirk was masterful at changing hearts on college campuses and shaping minds. And I do believe you're right that that's why we're seeing a shift in that culture. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Amy, thank you so much. How can people get a hold of you? Where can they find you? How can they follow you?
Yeah. Just go to TexasAllianceForLife.org. There's information on there about how to follow us on social media. I'm on social media as well, and so you're welcome to look me up, and I would invite anybody to reach out. My email is also on our website.
Absolutely, and we'll put that down in the links below so people can find you as well. Well, Amy, this has been incredible. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for standing on the front lines and everything you guys are doing to protect the unborn and to help women. Such a noble cause. And, man, it's just an honor to meet you and get to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone. We just wrapped up our podcast with Amy, but now we're going to head into the red zone, and I'm so excited. If you'd like to join us on the other side, please join our Patreon subscription and become a member of the Defender Circle. We're going to get into some great topics in the red zone, and I'm excited. So, Amy, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, let's do this. Welcome to the red zone.